The giant crystal dome stretched high above the conference room like a frozen ocean wave. The walls were made of some kind of blue stone that glowed softly in the dim light. 12 different alien species sat in floating chairs that moved silently. Through the air, their eyes were all focused on the small group of humans standing in the center of the room. Ambassador Ji-won Kim felt the weight of every alien gaze on her shoulders. She wore the black uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Behind her stood 3 other humans: Captain Min-ho Park in his military dress uniform, General Suna Lee with her many medals shining on her chest, and Dr. Taian Cho carrying a thick folder of documents. She had been in this room for 3 hours, listening to the aliens talk about peace and friendship and cooperation, but she knew the real truth hidden behind their pretty words. High Consul Drex rose from his floating throne. Galactic Peace Council. His 4 arms moved gracefully as he spoke, and his voice echoed through the crystal chamber like thunder. His large black eyes stared down at the humans with what looked like kindness, but Ji-won could see something else lurking beneath. "Welcome, honored guests from the planet Earth," he said in perfect English, though his mouth moved strangely when he formed the words. "Today we offer your species the greatest gift in the galaxy, the chance to join our peaceful coalition and live in harmony with all civilized beings." The other aliens nodded their heads or made whatever gestures their species used to show agreement. A creature that looked like a giant insect clicked its claws together. A being made of what appeared to be living rock shifted its massive body with grinding sounds. A species with tentacles instead of arms waved them in complex patterns. Ji-won looked at the datapad hidden in her palm. The small screen showed intelligence reports that had taken Earth 3 years to gather. The reports told a very different story than what the aliens were saying. The peaceful coalition was not peaceful at all. It was a trick used to make species give up their weapons and their freedom. She remembered the briefing back on Earth. President Hyunwoo Jang had shown them pictures of dead worlds. Planets that had once been green and full of life were now brown and empty. Their people had been taken to work in mines on distant asteroids. Their children had been separated from their families and sent to labor camps. The aliens called it peace, but it was really slavery. "Every species that joins our coalition gives up their military forces," said High Consul Drex's voice smooth like honey. "They hand over their weapons to us for safekeeping. This prevents war and conflict. In return, we protect them from any threats and provide them with advanced technology and trade opportunities." Captain Min-ho Park stepped closer to Ji-won. He pretended to adjust his uniform, but really he was showing her a small device hidden in his sleeve. The device was flashing red, which meant it had detected weapons pointed at them from hidden locations around the room. The aliens were not taking any chances. The humans were surrounded by armed guards that they could not see. General Suna Lee kept her face calm, but her hand moved slightly toward her belt where she carried a small plasma pistol. The movement was so tiny that only trained soldiers would notice it. She had spent 30 years fighting in wars on Earth, and she knew the smell of danger. This whole meeting was a trap die. Taeyeon Cho opened his folder and pretended to read from it, but actually he was looking at photos of alien military bases. The pictures had been taken by human spy satellites that the aliens did not know existed. The bases were full of weapons and ships and soldiers. The peaceful coalition had the largest military force in the galaxy. They did not keep peace through friendship. They kept it through fear. The benefits of joining are immediate. Your merchants will trade with species across the galaxy and become wealthy beyond imagination. Ji-won thought about her daughter back on Earth. Little Soyeon was only 8 years old, and she loved to draw pictures of spaceships and alien planets. She dreamed of exploring the stars and meeting friendly beings from other worlds, but if Earth joined this coalition, Soyeon would never get that chance. Crystal walls around them began to change color, becoming the aliens had been studying human behavior, and they knew how to manipulate emotions. "Of course, there are some small requirements," said High Consul Drex, and now his voice carried a harder edge. "All military personnel must be retrained for peaceful purposes. All weapons must be surrendered to coalition forces. All children must attend coalition schools to learn proper values. These are simple steps to ensure galactic harmony." Simple steps to ensure slavery, thought Ji-won. The aliens wanted to take away everything that made humans strong, their ability to fight their weapons, their children. She looked. Time for talk was over. Ji-won had been chosen to speak for all of humanity because she was good with words and could stay calm under pressure, but she was also chosen because she was brave enough to say no to the most powerful beings in the galaxy, even if it meant war, even if it meant death. She took a deep breath and felt the eyes of 12 alien species watching her. Every human back on Earth was depending on what she said next. President Jang had given her clear instructions, but the final decision was hers to make. She could save Earth by accepting slavery or doom it by choosing freedom. The silence in the crystal chamber grew heavy. High Consul Drex leaned forward in his floating throne, waiting for her answer. The other aliens stopped their movements and focused completely on the small human woman standing below them. They expected her to bow and accept their generous offer, like every other species had done, but they did not understand humans very well. They did not know that humans had spent their entire history fighting against those who tried to enslave them. They did not know that humans would rather die free than live as prisoners. They were about to learn what it meant to threaten the children of Earth. Juan looked up at High Consul Drex and smiled. It was not a friendly smile, it was the smile of a predator who had been pretending to be prey, the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Her voice was clear and strong when she finally spoke, and her words would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The words came out of Juan's mouth like bullets from a gun, cutting through the silence of the crystal chamber. The human species formally rejects your offer of membership in the peaceful coalition. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The floating aliens seemed frozen in their chairs, as if time itself had stopped. High Consul Drex stared at the small human woman, with all 4 of his eyes wide open. His blue skin began to turn a darker shade of purple. Then the chaos began. A creature that looked like a giant spider with metal legs started clicking and screeching. The being made of living rock began to shake, making the whole floor vibrate. The tentacled aliens started waving their arms so fast they looked like they were having seizures. Several smaller species began making high-pitched noises that hurt human ears. "This is impossible," shouted the spider creature in a voice like grinding metal. "No species has ever rejected the coalition's offer. It cannot be done." High Consul Drex raised all 4 of his arms, and the chamber fell silent again. His voice was no longer smooth and friendly. Now it sounded like ice breaking. "You do not understand, little humans. This is not a request that you can simply refuse. Every intelligent species in the galaxy must join the coalition. It is the law of civilized space." Captain Minho Park stepped forward, and his military boots made sharp sounds on the crystal floor. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Space Marines, and he knew how to face down bullies. "Sir, with respect, your law does not apply to species that never agreed to it. Earth is a sovereign world, and we make our own choices." The alien delegates began talking all at once in dozens of different languages. Some sounded like music. Others, like machines breaking down. A few sounded like animals screaming. The translation devices built into the chamber walls struggled to keep up with all the different voices. General Sunali moved to stand beside Captain Park. She was smaller than him, but something about her made even the largest aliens seem to shrink back. Her voice cut through the noise like a sword. "We know what your coalition really is. We know about the slave camps on Kepler 44b. We know about the children taken from their families on Proxima Centauri C. We know about the 17 species that said no before us and mysteriously disappeared." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of predators who had just realized their prey had teeth. "How could you possibly know about those operations?" whispered a tall gray alien with no mouth, only a slit where lips should be. "Those records were classified beyond the highest levels." Dr. Taeyeon opened his folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. He threw them onto the floor, where they scattered like leaves. The pictures showed mining operations with beings in chains, labor camps surrounded by electric fences, and ships full of prisoners being transported to unknown destinations. "Humans are very good at finding hidden things," said Dr. Cho calmly. "We have been watching you for 3 years since first contact. We know about your secret military bases. We know about your weapon stockpiles. We know about the star-rendered device that you use to destroy entire solar systems." Several aliens made sounds of shock and fear. The star render was supposed to be their ultimate secret weapon. How could these primitive humans know about it? High Consul Drex stood up from his floating throne, and his massive form cast a shadow over the human delegation. His voice shook with rage. "You dare spy on the coalition? You dare violate our privacy with your primitive technology, Ambassador. Yuan Kim looked up at the towering alien leader without fear. You dare enslave innocent people and call it peace. You dare murder entire species and call it diplomacy. If watching you commit crimes is spying, then yes, we are guilty of spying. The insect-like creature began clicking its claws together in a rhythm that sounded like a war drum. This is intolerable. The humans must be taught their place in the galactic order. They must be made to understand that defying the coalition has consequences. Other aliens began to agree. The rock creature suggested economic sanctions. The tentacled beings wanted to cut off all trade with Earth. Several smaller species called for immediate military action against the human homeworld, but Dr. Tae-hun Cho noticed something interesting. Behind all the anger and outrage, he saw fear in their alien eyes. Real, genuine fear. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years by making other species afraid of them. But now, they were the ones who were afraid. Why are you scared? Asked Dr. Cho. Suddenly, the chamber fell quiet again. You have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that can destroy planets. Why does one small species frighten you so much? Because we are not like the others, said General Suna Lee. Answering for the aliens, we do not kneel, we do not beg, we do not surrender. When you come for us, we will fight back, and you know that we will not fight like civilized beings. We will fight like humans. The word human seemed to hang in the air like a curse. Several aliens moved back in their floating chairs, as if trying to get away from the small group of humans standing in the center of the room. High Consul Drex tried to regain control of the situation. You are making a terrible mistake, he said. Your species numbers only 12 billion beings. Our coalition contains over 400 billion souls from 67 different worlds. Our combined military force could turn your planet into space dust in a matter of hours. Commander Unit SEO had been quiet until now, but she chose this moment to speak. She pulled out a small communication device and activated it. Phoenix 1 to Earth Command, the package has been delivered. Repeat, the package has been delivered. The coded message was heard by every alien in the chamber through their translation systems. They did not understand what it meant, but they understood that it was important. The humans had been planning this moment. They had prepared for it. What have you done? Demanded. High Consul Drexu have done exactly what we said we would do, replied Ambassador Yuan Kim. We have rejected your offer of slavery, disguised as peace. We have chosen freedom over security. We have chosen to fight rather than kneel. The alien leader stood to his full height of nearly 4 meters. His voice echoed through the crystal chamber with the power of a god. Very well, if you will not join the coalition willingly, then you will be brought in by force. The combined fleets of 67 worlds will teach your species the price of defying galactic. Captain Minho Park smiled, and it was not a nice smile, sir. I think you misunderstand the situation. You assume we are afraid of your fleets. You assume we are unprepared for war. You assume we are like all the other species you have conquered. What are you saying? We are saying that we have been preparing for this day since we first detected your signals 50 years ago. We are saying that we know exactly what you are and what you want. We are saying that when your fleets come to Earth, they will find something they have never encountered before. What is that? Humans who are ready for war. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the human delegation walking toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed through the crystal chamber like drumbeats. As they reached the doorway, Ambassador Yuan Kim turned back one final time. High Consul Drex made one last attempt at intimidation. Your species will be extinct within a standard galactic year, he called out. Your planet will be a dead rock floating in space. Your children will never grow up to see the stars. Yuan Kim smiled, and her smile was colder than the vacuum of space. We are counting on you trying, she said. Quietly then, she walked out of the chamber, followed by her companions. The crystal dome fell silent, except for the nervous breathing of 67 alien species who had just realized they might have made a terrible mistake. The humans were gone, but their words remained hanging in the air, like a challenge for the first time in 1,000 years. The galactic peace Council felt something they had not experienced since they began their conquest of the galaxy. They felt afraid. 3 months had passed since the humans walked out of the crystal chamber, and the galaxy had not been the same. The largest war fleet in galactic history now floated at the edge of human space, like a storm cloud made of metal and death. 3,000 ships from 7 different species stretched across the dark void. each one bristling with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. Admiral Kexen of the Valari stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the small blue planet that had caused so much trouble. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, just another world spinning quietly around its yellow star. He could not understand how such a tiny, insignificant planet could threaten the mighty coalition. The admiral was old. Even by Valari standards, his blue skin was marked with the scars of a dozen battles, and his forearms moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a war. Behind him stood commanders from 6 other species, all waiting for his orders. To begin the assault, Earth President Hunwu Jiang sat in the underground war room deep beneath the capital city. The room was filled with screens showing the alien fleet and the positions of human forces. The president looked older than his 50 years. As he studied the tactical displays around him, stood the finest military minds humanity had ever produced. Fleet Admiral Soman Kong pointed to one of the screens. "Sir, they have us outnumbered, 10-1. Their ships are larger than ours, and their weapons are more advanced. According to our intelligence reports, any conventional battle would be suicide." General Doyan Lim nodded in agreement. "But we are not fighting a conventional battle. We have been preparing for this moment since first contact. We have advantages. They do not know about strategic commander." Youngji Bei activated a holographic display showing the human defensive network. What the aliens see is a small fleet of primitive ships guarding one planet. What they do not see are the asteroid bases, the hidden weapon platforms, and the surprise we have been building for 3 years. Communications officer Young Ji-han looked up from her console. "Sir, the alien fleet is broadcasting a message. They demand immediate surrender. They are giving us 24 hours to comply." President Jiang stood up and walked to the center of the room. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the steel beneath it. "Send them our reply. Tell them that humanity chooses to fight." The message was transmitted across space to Admiral Kexen's flagship. The alien commander read the human response and felt a mixture of anger and confusion. The humans choose certain death. What the admiral did not know was that humans had been watching and learning for 50 years. When Earth first detected alien radio signals, the governments of the world had made a secret decision they would prepare for the day when those aliens came calling, and they would be ready for war, not peace. Hidden asteroid bases had been carved out of rocks floating in space. Scientific research facilities were actually military fortresses, armed satellites disguised as communication, new technologies that the galaxy had never seen. Stealth ships that could become invisible to sensors, kinetic weapons that could turn small asteroids into planet-killing missiles, and something else, something so terrible that only the highest-ranking humans knew about it. The battle began at dawn. Earth-time Admiral Kexen sent his first wave of ships forward, expecting to crush the human defenses quickly. Instead, his ships began disappearing. Respond Captain Boram Kim commanded one of the stealth frigates that struck at the alien fleet. Her ship, the Invisible Sword, had practiced these hit-and-run tactics for months. The crew worked like a machine, appearing behind enemy ships, destroying them and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. But it was not just the technology that shocked the alien forces. It was the humans themselves. When alien boarding parties managed to get onto human ships, they found fighters who refused to surrender even when their situation was hopeless. Human soldiers fought with knives and bare hands when their guns ran out. They used their own bodies as weapons, turning themselves into living missiles. Lieutenant Jin Woo-oh found himself trapped on a damaged human destroyer with 30 alien warriors surrounding him. But instead of surrendering, he picked up a piece of broken metal and charged at the aliens, screaming a battle cry that froze their blood. The alien warriors had fought many species, but they had never encountered anything like human. Desperation, Jinwoo held them off for 3 hours, fighting like a wild animal until human reinforcements arrived. When they found him, he was unconscious and covered in alien blood, but still breathing. Stories like this spread through the alien fleet faster than wildfire. Some nightmare realm, they seemed to welcome death as long as they could take their enemies with them. Admiral Kexen tried to maintain order, but panic was spreading through his forces. Captains reported that their crews were becoming afraid to board human ships. Some of his best warriors were requesting transfers to other sectors away from the human front. By the end of the first day, the alien fleet had lost over 800 ships. The humans had lost fewer than 50. The admiral could not Understand how this was possible. His forces were better equipped, better trained, and far more numerous. Second day was worse. Human reinforcements arrived from hidden bases throughout the solar system. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed themselves to be armed warships. Mining vessels turned out to be carrying military-grade weapons. Captain Minho Park led a squadron of converted civilian ships against the alien heavy cruisers. His flagship was actually a modified passenger liner, but it carried enough firepower to destroy ships 10 times its size. Used the fleet's most powerful weapon, a gravity bomb that could tear apart entire space stations, but when he gave the order to fire, nothing happened. The weapon systems had been sabotaged by human agents who had somehow infiltrated his flagship. By the fourth day, the mighty galactic armada was in full retreat. No time to regroup. The humans showed no mercy to those who had threatened their world. Ship after ship was destroyed as the alien fleet fled back toward Coalition space. Haunt the galaxy. When Admiral Kexon finally reached Coalition territory, he had fewer than 200 ships left. Of the 3,000 he had started with, his proud uniform was torn and stained, his confidence was shattered, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen health of survivors, told stories that seemed impossible. Humans who continued fighting even when their ships were destroyed. Pilots who rammed their damaged vessels into alien battleships rather than retreat. Soldiers who showed no fear of death and seemed to grow stronger the more desperate their situation became. The most terrifying story of all came from Commander Oak, who had witnessed the final battle. Damaged fighter take on an entire alien squadron. The human ship was on fire, his weapons were gone, and his life support was failing. Instead of ejecting or surrendering, the human pilot flew his burning ship directly into the alien command vessel. The explosion took out not just the target but 3 other ships that were too close. The pilot had turned himself into a weapon and won a victory that should have been impossible. These stories spread through Coalition space like a plague. The mighty alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years suddenly faced something they had never encountered before. An enemy that could not be intimidated. An enemy that grew more dangerous when cornered. An enemy that would rather die than kneel. The age of easy conquest was over. The humans had shown the galaxy that there were still species willing to fight for their freedom. And somewhere in the depths of space, Earth was already preparing for the next battle, knowing that the aliens would return with even greater force. But they would be ready because humans had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes peace can only be won through war. The survivors of the Great Fleet limped back to Coalition space like wounded animals seeking shelter. Admiral Kexon stood before the emergency assembly of the Galactic Peace Council, his once magnificent uniform now torn and stained with the blood of his own species. His hands shook as he tried to deliver his report to the gathered alien representatives. "They are not like any species we have encountered," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the vast crystal chamber. "They do not surrender. When faced with death, they welcome it. They use their own bodies as weapons when their guns run out. They fight like creatures possessed by demons." High Consul Drex leaned forward in his floating throne, his forearms gripping the armrests so tightly that the metal began to bend. "Explain to me, Admiral, how a fleet of 3,000 ships was defeated by a handful of primitive humans." Admiral Kexon closed his eyes and the memories came flooding back. "One human soldier held off 30 of our best warriors for 3 hours with nothing but a metal bar and her bare hands when we cornered a group of human pilots in a damaged ship. They set off their own reactor rather than be captured. They destroyed themselves and took 50% of our boarding party with them." The assembled aliens began to murmur among themselves. The sounds they made were not the confident discussions of conquerors, but the nervous whispers of beings who had just learned they were not invincible. The Scorvette representative hissed through his fangs, while the Manthari clicked their mandibles in agitation. But the real terror was spreading far beyond the council chambers. Intelligence Officer Yelim Shin sat in her hidden monitoring station on the edge of Coalition space. Listening to the communications traffic between alien worlds, she had been intercepting their messages for months, and what she heard now made her blood run cold. The aliens were calling humans monsters, demons, death worshippers, creatures that should not exist in a civilized galaxy. Some species were demanding that humanity be completely exterminated before they could spread their madness to other worlds. Others wanted to build walls around human space to contain the infection. But fear was making the coalition do something it had never done before. It was making mistakes within days of the failed invasion. Human ships began appearing in systems the coalition had never expected them to reach. Captain Boram Kim led the first expeditionary force to establish mining operations on worlds rich in the rare metals needed for human weapons. Her small fleet moved like ghosts through space, appearing wherever they wanted and disappearing before coalition forces could respond. The aliens tried to intercept these human raiders, but found that their prey had become hunters. Human ships would ambush alien patrols, destroy them completely, and vanish without a trace. Entire alien outposts went silent overnight, with no distress signals and no survivors present. Hyun Hu Zhang stood in the Earth Command Center watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. The human expansion was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope. Colony ships disguised as merchant vessels were establishing outposts on dozens of worlds. Mining operations were securing the resources needed for a long war, but the most important victory was not military, it was psychological. The coalition had ruled through fear for thousands of years, making other species afraid to resist. Now, for the first time, those same species were seeing their masters afraid. The Zephyrian Trade Union was the first to break ranks. They announced that they would remain neutral in any future conflicts between humans and the coalition within hours. 3 other species made similar declarations. The careful web of alliances that held the coalition together was beginning to unravel. The crystalline collective went even further, publicly stating that they welcomed human expansion into their territory. Their crystal ships began appearing alongside human vessels, offering supplies and safe harbor. The living rock beings of Titan Prime sent a secret message to Earth Command, offering to share their advanced shield technology. High Consul Drex tried to maintain control, but rebellion was brewing within his own government. Younger Valari politicians demanded his resignation, claiming that his aggressive policies had awakened a sleeping monster. The careful balance of power that had kept the coalition stable for millennia was crumbling. Emergency sessions were called on dozens of worlds as species debated whether to continue supporting the coalition or try to make peace with the humans. Separately, the unity that had made the alien alliance so powerful was fracturing under the pressure of facing an enemy they could not understand or defeat. Colonel Jin Wuo led a reconnaissance mission deep into coalition territory, expecting to find massive military preparations. Instead, he found chaos and panic. Alien worlds were recalling their fleets from distant colonies to defend their home systems. Trade routes were being abandoned as merchant ships refused to travel without heavy military escorts. In a dozen alien languages across hundreds of worlds, children of alien species were told scary stories about the monsters from Earth who fought without fear and showed no mercy to their enemies. Some species began building underground shelters. Others started stockpiling food and weapons, but the most shocking discovery came from intercepted coalition communications. Dr. Taeyeon Cho sat in his intelligence center on Earth, reading translated messages that revealed the true extent of alien panic. The coalition was not just afraid of human military might, they were afraid of human ideas. The very concept that a species could say no to the coalition was spreading like wildfire. Worlds that had been peaceful members for centuries were beginning to question why they had given up their weapons and their freedom. Rebellion was brewing on planets that had not seen violence in generations. Species that had forgotten how to fight were remembering their young, were asking questions about the time before the coalition, when their people had been warriors and explorers instead of slaves. Some were even requesting weapons and training from mysterious human contacts. The coalition tried to suppress these rebellions, but found their forces stretched to thin. Every ship sent to crush a revolt was one less ship available to defend against human attacks. Every soldier used to maintain order was one less soldier available for the coming war. Admiral Soman Kong reviewed the intelligence reports with growing amazement. We expected to fight a military war, she told President Jiang. Instead, we seem to be fighting a war of ideas. Our very existence is challenging everything that coalition believes about how the galaxy should work. The humans had done more than just win a battle. They had shattered the myth of coalition invincibility. For 1,000 years, alien species had believed that resistance was impossible, that the coalition was too strong to fight. Now, they knew the truth. Any species could resist if they had the courage to try, but the coalition was not finished yet. Deep in the most secure facilities of their core worlds, Alien scientists were working on new weapons designed specifically to kill humans they had learned that conventional warfare would not work against an enemy that fought without fear. The Star Render project was accelerated. Resources that had been spread across dozens of research programs were concentrated on creating the ultimate weapon, something that could destroy not just human ships or human worlds, but the human spirit itself. High Consul Drex stood in the weapon testing facility watching the final preparations. The device before him could destabilize stars, turning entire solar systems into expanding clouds of plasma. It had never been used in the Coalition's 1,000-year history, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "This weapon will end the human threat once and for all," he declared to the assembled scientists, "and military commanders. Earth will burn, and with it, the dangerous idea that any species can defy the will of the Coalition." But even as he spoke the words, High Consul Drex felt a chill of uncertainty. The humans had surprised them before. What if they had prepared for this as well? What if even the ultimate weapon was not enough to stop a species that seemed to grow stronger with each challenge? In the depths of space, human spy satellites recorded every detail of the Star Render project. The information was transmitted back to Earth, where scientists and military planners began working on countermeasures. The aliens thought they had a secret weapon, but humans had secrets of their own. The galaxy was changing. The age of unquestioned alien rule was ending. Whether it would be replaced by human dominance or something else entirely remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the species that had dared to say no to peace had changed the course of galactic history forever, and they were just getting started. Deep beneath the surface of the Coalition capital world, High Consul Drex stood before the most terrible weapon ever created. The Star Render stretched across the massive underground chamber like a sleeping dragon made of metal and energy. Its surface pulsed with dark light that seemed to swallow the surrounding darkness. The weapon had been built in absolute secrecy over the course of centuries. Using technology stolen from 17 different species, each component had been constructed on a different world so that no single species would know the true purpose of their work. Only the highest-ranking council members knew that this device could destroy entire solar systems by destabilizing their stars. General Suna Lee stood in the Human Intelligence Center on Earth, studying the intercepted alien transmissions with growing horror. The translation computers had finally broken the Coalition encryption codes, and what they revealed made her blood freeze. The aliens were preparing to use a weapon that could turn the sun itself into a bomb. She immediately contacted President Hyunwoo Jang, who was meeting with the War Cabinet in the Underground Command Center. "Sir, we have a problem. The Coalition has a superweapon called the Star Render. It can destroy our entire solar system by making our sun explode." The room fell silent as the implications sank in Dr. Mingi. Park looked up from her research notes. "If they use this weapon, there will be nothing left of Earth or any of our colonies. Every human being in the solar system will die in seconds." Fleet Admiral So-Min Kong studied the intelligence reports. "How long do we have before they can deploy this weapon?" Security Chief Nari Song consulted her datapad. "Our sources inside Coalition space estimate 48 hours, maybe less. They are rushing the final preparations. The Council has voted to use the Star Render rather than risk losing more conventional forces." President Jang felt the weight of his species' survival on his shoulders. For the first time since the war began, he wondered if humanity had made a terrible mistake by rejecting the Coalition offer. But then he thought of his daughter and all the other children who would grow up as slaves if the aliens won. "We need options," he said quietly. "What can we do to our?" Minji Park had been working on humanity's secret weapon project for 3 years. Her quantum disruption field could permanently disable the alien faster-than-light communication network that held their empire together, but she had always planned to use it as a defensive measure, not as a desperate gambit. "I have something," she said slowly, "but using it will be incredibly dangerous. The quantum field could disrupt the Star Render, but it might also affect every piece of advanced technology in the galaxy, including our own commander, Sung-Hoon." You had been listening quietly, but now he stepped forward. "I can get a small team to the Star Render facility. My stealth ships have been practicing deep penetration missions for months. If we can plant the disruption device directly on the weapon, we might be able to destroy it." The plan was insane. The Star Render facility was located in the most heavily defended system in Coalition space. It was surrounded by thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and weapon platforms that could vaporize entire fleets. But humanity had run out of safe options. Operation Divine Wind launched 6 hours later. Commander Sung-hoon, you led 12 stealth ships through hyperspace toward the coalition capital. The ships were crewed by volunteers who knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but went anyway, because someone had to try. Meanwhile, Dr. Mingi Park worked frantically to modify her quantum disruption device. The weapon had to be powerful enough to destroy the Star Render, but precise enough not to destroy every piece of technology in the galaxy. It was like trying to perform surgery with a nuclear bomb. The stealth ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the coalition capital system and immediately went into full stealth mode. They moved like ghosts through the outer defenses, slipping between patrol routes and avoiding sensor sweeps. Captain Minho Park commanded one of the infiltration vessels and watched in amazement as they passed through layer after layer of defenses. The aliens had built their fortress to keep out conventional fleets, but they had never imagined that ships could become completely invisible to their sensors. But as they approached the Star Render facility, they discovered something that changed everything. The weapon was not just a planet killer, it was powered by the life force of enslaved populations from conquered worlds. Billions of beings were connected to the device through horrible machines that slowly drained their energy to power the ultimate weapon. Lieutenant Yelim Shin monitored the alien communications from her hidden listening post and made a discovery that shook her to her core. The Star Render had been used before 17 times over the past 1,000 years. 17 species that had rejected the coalition offer had been completely exterminated. Their stars turned into supernovas that left no trace of their existence. Earth was supposed to be number 18. The infiltration team reached the Star Render facility and began planting Dr. Park's quantum disruption devices throughout the massive structure, but as they worked, they found evidence of the coalition true nature in the facility's databanks. Entire species had been bred like cattle to provide energy for the weapon. Children had been taken from their families and connected to the horrible machines. Commander Sung-hoon, who felt sick as he read the files, but he also felt something else: burning rage. The coalition had not just conquered other species, they had turned them into batteries for their ultimate weapon. Every peaceful member of the coalition was really a slave, being slowly consumed to power their master's technology. The mission took 12 hours longer than planned because the team kept finding more horrors in the facility. Laboratories, medical experiments on living beings, genetic modification programs designed to make slaves more efficient, energy extraction procedures that kept victims alive, but in constant agony. When they finally planted the last disruption device and prepared to leave, Commander Yu made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He activated the slave release protocols, freeing millions of beings who had been connected to the Star Render for decades or centuries. The facility alarms began blaring as the freed slaves realized what had happened. Many of them turned on their alien captors with fury that had been building for generations. The carefully ordered facility descended into chaos as revenge began. Darmingi Park received the signal from the infiltration team and activated her quantum disruption field. From Earth, the wave of energy traveled faster than light, reaching the coalition capital system in seconds. When it hit the Star Render facility, the weapon began to tear itself apart, but the disruption field did more than just destroy the weapon. It permanently disabled the coalition faster-than-light communication network. For the first time in 1,000 years, the alien empire was blind and unable to coordinate its forces across the galaxy. Coalition outposts lost contact with their headquarters. Alien governors found themselves cut off from their superiors. Military commanders received no orders and did not know what to do. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly realized that their masters could no longer watch them. The rebellion that had been brewing beneath the surface of coalition society exploded into open revolt. Worlds that had been peaceful for generations erupted in violence. As enslaved populations turned on their captors, the careful order that had held the alien empire together collapsed in a matter of hours. High Consul Drex stood in his command center watching his empire die. The communication screens were dark, the status reports had stopped coming, and he could hear explosions in the distance as rebel forces attacked the capital. The Star Render was destroyed. His ultimate weapon had become his ultimate failure. But the worst part was knowing that the humans were coming. He could feel it in his bones. The approaching doom of a species that had proven They could not be conquered or intimidated or broken. Earth ships were already being detected at the edge of Coalition territory, and this time they were not alone. Liberation fleets included ships from dozens of species that had thrown off their chains and joined the human cause. The galaxy was rising up against its oppressors, and at the head of the revolution flew the black ships of Earth. The age of the Coalition was ending, and the age of freedom was about to begin, but first there would be a reckoning. The humans and their allies were coming to settle accounts with those who had enslaved the galaxy for 1,000 years, and they would show no mercy to those who had shown no mercy to others. The Liberation Fleet emerged from hyperspace like an avenging storm made of metal and fire. 10,000 ships from 40 different species moved in perfect formation toward the Coalition capital system. At the center of the massive armada flew the black warships of Earth, their hulls scarred from dozens of battles, but their crews, eager for the final confrontation. Admiral So-Min Kong stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberation, watching the enemy homeworld grow larger on the main screen. Beside her stood representatives from every species that had thrown off the Coalition chains. The Crystalline Collective had sent their most powerful vessels. The Zephyrian Trade Union had contributed their fastest ships. Even the Peaceful Aquatic Collective had armed their exploration vessels for Worthus. "Is Admiral Kong to all ships?" she announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we end 1,000 years of slavery. Today we bring justice to those who have enslaved the galaxy. Today we show the universe that freedom is worth any price." The Coalition capital system should have been defended by thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. Instead, the human fleet found scattered groups of vessels fleeing in panic. The destruction of the faster-than-light communication network had left the alien empire unable to coordinate its defenses. Captain Borum Kim led a squadron of human destroyers toward the outer defense platforms. Many of the alien weapon stations had been abandoned by their crews, who had fled when the rebellion began. Others had been taken over by freed slaves, who now turned the Coalition weapons against their former masters. But the real battle was taking place on the surface of the capital world. Billions of enslaved beings had risen up against their captors. The carefully ordered cities of the Coalition elite were burning as generations of suppressed rage finally found expression. General Suna Lee coordinated the ground assault from her command ship, watching as human marines joined forces with rebel armies from dozens of species. The aliens had trained their slaves to be docile and obedient, but they had never broken their spirit. When the moment came, the enslaved populations fought with a fury that shocked even the humans. The Coalition government had retreated to their massive space station in orbit around the capital world. The station was the size of a small moon and had served as the seat of galactic government for millennia. Now it was the last stronghold of a dying Empire. High Consul Drex paced back and forth in his command center, watching the tactical displays with growing desperation. His empire was collapsing around him. Species that had been loyal for centuries were joining the rebellion. Entire sectors were declaring independence. Military units were surrendering without a fight. "How did it come to this?" he asked his remaining advisors. "We offered them peace. We offered them prosperity. We offered them a place in the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. The truth is, they never wanted peace," said Commander Yun Seo, stepping into the command center, followed by a squad of human soldiers. The Coalition leaders turned in shock, wondering how humans had penetrated their most secure facility. "They wanted freedom," she continued, "and you offered them slavery disguised as peace. You took their children. You stole their resources. You turned entire species into batteries for your weapons." High Consul Drex activated his personal shield and drew his ceremonial weapon, but the human soldiers made no move to attack. Instead, they waited as more figures entered the command center. Representatives from 17 different species walked into the room. Beings whose peoples had been enslaved by the Coalition for generations. "We are here to offer you the same choice you offered us," said Ambassador Giwon Kim, her voice calm but her eyes cold. "You can surrender and face trial for your crimes, or you can fight and face the consequences." The alien leader looked around the room at the faces of his former victims and saw no mercy in their eyes. The beings he had enslaved for centuries were now his judges, and they would not be as generous as he had pretended to be. "What guarantee do I have that you will treat me fairly?" he asked. "The same guarantee you gave to the children you took from their families," replied Dr. Taeyeon Cho. None but General Suna Lee stepped forward, her expression stern but Not cruel, the difference is that we actually believe in justice. Your coalition believed in power. We will give you a fair trial and let the evidence speak for itself. The coalition space station surrendered without a fight. Most of the alien leadership chose to face trial rather than die in a hopeless battle, but some chose to fight to the end, believing that death was preferable to answering for their crimes. The final battle was brief, but vicious human Marines and rebel forces fought through the station's corridors against die-hard coalition loyalists. The aliens fought with the desperation of beings who knew they had nothing left to lose, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. When the shooting stopped, the Galactic Peace Coalition had ceased to exist. The government that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was gone, replaced by something new. The Alliance of Free Worlds was born in the ruins of the old empire, dedicated to the principles of freedom and self-determination. Hyunwoo Jang addressed the galaxy from the former coalition capital. His words broadcast to every inhabited world in known space: the age of forced peace is over, he declared. No species will ever again be compelled to give up their freedom in exchange for protection. The trials of the coalition leadership lasted for months. Representatives from every enslaved species testified about the crimes committed against their people. The evidence was overwhelming, and the verdicts were unanimous. The alien leaders were found guilty of genocide, slavery, and crimes against sentient life. But the punishment was not death. Humanity and their allies chose a different path. The convicted coalition leaders were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives helping to rebuild the worlds they had destroyed. They would work alongside the beings they had enslaved, learning what it meant to serve others instead of ruling them. The galaxy began to heal freed slaves, returned to their homeworlds, or chose to build new lives on other planets. Species that had been enemies for centuries discovered they could work together. When they were not being manipulated by their former masters, the human fleet returned to Earth as heroes, but they carried with them the knowledge of what they had seen in the coalition slave facilities. Captain Minho Park spoke for many when he said, "We fought for our freedom, but we discovered that freedom means nothing if others are still enslaved." Earth became the headquarters of the new alliance, but humans insisted that they would not rule the galaxy as the coalition had done. Instead, they would serve as guardians, making sure that no species ever again tried to enslave others. The star-rendered technology was completely destroyed, and the freed slaves who had powered it were given new lives on worlds of their choosing. The horrible facilities where they had been imprisoned were turned into memorials to ensure that future generations would never forget the price of allowing evil to go unchallenged. Dr. Mingy Park established the Freedom Research Institute, dedicated to developing technologies that would protect liberty rather than destroy it. Her quantum communication network allowed species to coordinate their defenses without giving up their independence. Years passed, and the galaxy began to prosper in ways it never had under coalition rule. Free trade flourished between species who had been kept apart by their former masters. Scientific discoveries accelerated as different cultures shared their knowledge, but humanity never forgot the lesson they had learned. Sometimes the only way to achieve real peace is to fight for it. The human fleet remained strong and ready, always watching for signs that someone might try to rebuild the old system of slavery and oppression. Children on Earth and 1,000 other worlds learned the story of how their parents and grandparents had stood up to the mightiest empire in galactic history. They learned that freedom is not free, that it must be earned and defended by each generation. The galaxy had learned the true meaning of the word human. It did not mean conqueror or destroyer. It meant protector. It meant someone who would stand up for the weak and fight against injustice no matter the cost. And when other species in distant parts of the galaxy sent signals asking for help against their own oppressors, the response was always the same. The humans were coming, and they were bringing freedom. With them, the age of the coalition was over. The age of freedom had begun. And at the heart of it all was a small blue planet whose people had dared to say no to false peace and yes to the hard work of building a better galaxy for everyone. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, knowing that somewhere among them was a species that would never stop fighting for what was right.